Hi, everybody. Welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started. We are at the Greater San Diego Association of Realtors, and this is my contact information. And James is here today, and he suggested that I not have that great big long 20-minute PowerPoint, so it's going to be pretty quick. We're going to talk today about the residential listing agreement, and frankly, we're going to kill it. I mean, we're just going to knock this out. So we're going to talk about a couple paragraphs today that aren't going to require a whole lot of your effort or a whole lot of your work. You don't have to input anything, which means it's fairly safe legally. However, you got to know what it says. And a lot of times, an agent that's been around a while will skip the pre-printed language, not spend any time on it when, how long have you had your license? I mean, I always ask somebody, and I say, you've had your license for 5 years. You never took a chance to read the document. I mean, you should, take that moment. So we're going to talk about a couple of really cool things that are included in there, and how it is designed to protect the parties from each other as well as protect you in your transaction. So again, we're going to be talking about stuff that's going to sound like it's legal and all that. I recommend not using the word legal in a sentence. I have so many people that call me and ask me for legal advice. And the first thing I always say is, you know what, I'm just not qualified to give you legal advice. You need to talk to an attorney about that. I'm a lawyer. I'm not an attorney. I don't practice law. So, but God knows I do a lot of trial work. And when I'm in trial, I'm there as a court-certified expert witness on a variety of subjects, including market conditions in San Diego, by the way, which, you know what, look out, it's coming back. And hopefully you've been preparing for this because it's a big deal. Obviously consult with your broker, consult with your attorney. I am not a substitute for that. But I am happy to help you in any way that I can as far as your real estate business is concerned. There's my email address. If you want to be on the Saturday list of updates, send me an email. Try not to put in email addresses in today's conversation because I lose it when I log off. So if you are signed up and you're not getting them, I'm trying to work on a workaround for that. Apparently, Gmail, a lot of people have free email accounts, and so it tends not to work real well. So anyway, that being said, let's go live and talk about what our subject matter is today. And so we're going to start off at the best place to start. Last week we did paragraphs 6 through 8. And as I mentioned in this morning's class, I thought we had a really good class this morning on lawsuit avoidance. That was really a lot of fun. And again, those of you who were on that, we had a chance to share questions back and forth. And I got some input from some people I respect quite a bit, who've been in the business for a long time. So, I'm usually handling things when people are in trouble. I would just as soon help you before we're in trouble. Let's take care of it ahead of time. That part of it's usually free, but by the time we get into court, I'm just going to be kind of stuck. I got to charge. So that being said, let's talk a little bit about agency relationships. And we mentioned this morning in our lawsuit avoidance class. Agency is in all my years, 41 years of doing this, I've never had any broker be able to explain agency to me. I assure you that when you're in deposition and when you're in front of a judge, you better know what it means. Hopefully you'll never have to go there, but I go there a lot. And so agency is a very important concept. In our fact pattern this morning, we had the licensee writing an offer without disclosing the concept of agency. And then we had the counteroffer never coming back and confirming, because we had, again, the agent went and bought a purchase agreement from a stationery store. And we don't know if it had the agency disclosure requirements in it. But remember, we have a form, and here it is addressed already. I'm going to find my pen around here someplace, because I do like to write on this. There it is. I do like to write on my notes here. So let's take a look at what we're going to be discussing. So I get to annotate, which is fun. So we're going to be talking about number 9. We're going to be talking about disclosure. And the reason that this is important, and again, pre-printed language, people call me up and they say, well, where in the contract does it say this? And I say, well, if you looked at paragraph number 9A, It's just, and it's like, okay, I understand you don't want to have to memorize all this stuff. And for me, it's a life. So, but remember, this is the part of the listing agreement where the seller acknowledges that you have disclosed agency to them. And so that agency disclosure form is literally a snapshot out of the Civil Code. It's California Civil Code 2079. We literally took a picture of it and put it on a document with the CAR logo on it. Page 2 is just chock full of the smallest print you're ever going to see, and yet some of the more important stuff that you're going to be looking at. So it's important that the reason that the box is pre-checked for you, in the immortal words of one of the CAR attorneys, Neil Kale, and he said, we just need to we're molding behavior. We want to make sure that people are making that disclosure. And so we're just going to assume you did, and we're going to have the seller sign off on the fact that you did. Now, woe be to you if you didn't. That's going to be a problem for you, okay? But by default, this agreement says that this listing agreement, again, says that you have made that disclosure to the seller. If you really want to understand the concept of agency, you really need to read the back page of that form. I think in the front page of it, the print is bigger, it's easier to read. Don't let the back page discourage you from looking at that, but I'm telling you, it's good stuff. And so, we go through our career and we're always afraid somebody's going to ask us a question that we don't know the answer to. Well, here's your opportunity to actually read it and actually know the answer to it. So for everybody who is on the presentation today, please, a couple of things. One, take notes. Two, I'm more than happy to send you the transcript of this, the actual replay of the webinar. It'll be about an hour after it's over, because it takes an hour for them to go through and make sure I haven't said anything bad. I'm just kidding. They don't do that. But it takes an hour for it to finish taping. So I'll send it to you, no problem at all. But also please take notes, because that agency disclosure form, and this was because I taught in 3 colleges for 15 years, and it was always the number 2 question was, what is the first form we ever have a client sign? And the answer has always been the agency disclosure form. Okay, what is the first document that is signed? That should be the RA, the Realtor's Acknowledgement Form. So put that in your template. Make sure you're using that on your buyer offer presentation, on your seller listing presentation. You need to use the RA form to tell everybody the difference between a licensee and a realtor, and you are realtors. Okay, and then the agency disclosures, and you're the only one who signs the RA, right? I always sign it in front of the client, hand it over to him. I hold my hand up and I go, look, no blood. And it's like the message is that, we're here to sign stuff today. And this is the start of it. And I'm going to go ahead and start by signing something before you sign things. And guess what? You get to follow behind me and do the same thing. We're going to sign a bunch of stuff. So please remember down for my computer, it's on the bottom of my screen. There's a tab that says Q&A. If you have a question or if you have a comment, please put something in there. Just type it in, and then I'll respond to you. Because of the size, the number of people in the audience today, I can't really make it go live where everybody can talk, because we'll be talking over each other. So put a little note in there. I'm happy to answer any question that you have. It kind of actually makes my day. So please feel free to do that. So, okay. So that being said, we have discussed the disclosure in 9A, and then we're going to take a look at B, the seller's representation. So the broker represents seller in any resulting transaction, except as we're going to talk about later in 3F, okay? So in this case now, you're signing an exclusive authorization right to sell, which means that broker is the agent for the seller. The broker is the agent for the seller. We mistakenly call ourselves agents, but we're not agents. We're salesperson associates, we're broker associates, we're things like that. But the agent is the broker. Okay, so everything is done under that agent, under that broker ticket. Okay, and that's why we, as a salesperson, we must be affiliated with a broker. And if you are I'm a broker. If you are a salesperson, listen, I want you to get your broker's license. I'll help you do that. Okay, and I teach the course for the association. We didn't get to have it in May because of, obviously the current state of affairs, but I've got about a 97% passing rate. So once you get your broker's license, that doesn't mean leave where you are. That just means, you should really have your broker's license. It's a good thing to have. Okay. So again, paragraph 9B says, we're your broker unless you're except as specified in 3F coming up in just a little bit. Okay. So let's take a look at paragraph number 9C, possible dual agency. So this is an important concept. So when I'm taking the listing on a property, at that point, I am in a single agency, okay? The law says that I am single agency, okay? When I'm writing an offer for a buyer, when I first meet a buyer, I am in single agency with the buyer. Now, when an offer comes in, or when I write an offer for a buyer, now at that point, I know whether or not I'm going to continue to be single agency, or am I going to become dual agent? Okay, and again, the agency revolves around the broker. So the agent is the broker. Everybody good with that? Okay, I think that's probably a better explanation than I've seen out there in the world. So all of that has to do with, where is it under the agent, under the broker? Okay, so for example, I'm Burke Real Estate Consultants, and I am taking a listing on a property. I am now the agent. I'm sorry. I am now I'm representing the agency for the seller. So I'm, obviously the broker in my company. I gave my company to Linda. So Linda is actually the broker of record for our company. So Linda is the agent. Okay. And so when I take that listing, I am under single agency. Now, let's say that I write an offer for this property. I am now representing a buyer as well. Now I am entering into possible dual agency, and that's where we are now in C. Now, in a lot of states, and I teach in other states as well, I can tell you that the fact that you are going to becoming dual agent means that you're going to end up having to get permission from the buyer to allow that to happen. So in other words, the buyer, it doesn't automatically have to just say, oh, no, wait a minute. Yeah, go ahead, be my agent. Now, of course, if you've done a good job with your buyer, they're going to want that, right? But there are situations where the buyer says, oh, no, I think that's a conflict of interest, because the law says the agent, the broker, now has information on both sides, and maybe that is a conflict of interest. In the legal field, it's definitely a conflict of interest. In the real estate field, we have that little niche carved out that we're actually able to do that. Okay, everybody good with that? So in some states, like if you look in Virginia, for example, I'm the listing agent, and then another agent from the company brings in an offer. That now we have to make a decision. The buyer says, well, I'm not going to agree to dual agency because I don't think Kevin should represent both the seller and the buyer. So, what can we do about that? And then the broker designates, and we call that designated agency, designates another agent or another licensee to be the agent licensee for the buyer. Okay. Now these are exam questions in other states, and again, I teach those exams in other states as well. So it's an important concept to remember. So I have single agency, I have dual agency, and then in some states I have designated agency where the broker can actually designate an agent to be a licensee to be the licensee for the other party, so that there's that fiction that supposedly that's not dual agency anymore. I've had some really good cases on this, and some of them with amazing outcomes. And so just be aware of the fact that the agent is the broker. So, okay, so depending upon, and again, this is possible dual agency because this is at a time I'm taking the listing and I don't know at this point who the buyer is going to be represented by. So I don't know if I'm going to remain in single agency or whether I'm going to flip into dual agency. Okay, so depending on the circumstances, famous saying from law school, may be necessary or appropriate for the broker to act as an agent, the broker, okay, to act as an agent for both the seller and the buyer, exchange party, or one or more additional buyer parties, okay? So just as I was just saying a second ago, broker shall, as soon as practicable, I never knew that was a real word, did you? And if you read page 2 of the agency disclosure, you'll see it on the page. And this is a quote, Okay, so as soon as practicable, and that's also on the state exam, by the way, disclose to the seller any election to act as a dual agent representing both seller and buyer. So here it is. All we got to do is disclose it in California. That's an exciting day, right? Why do we like dual agency? Oh my God, I get paid twice as much. I got twice the liability. You know, there's all kinds of things. You should really be careful about that. We have brokers in our office, some of whom are attorneys, who will not represent both parties. You know, they say, listen, I'm just going to stay, I'll represent the seller. You pick somebody else in the company to represent the buyer. And so the law says still dual agency, but in the legal mind, we just can't get it. Okay. All right. So anyway, if a buyer is procured directly by the broker or an associate licensee, so broker associate or sales associate in the broker's firm, seller hereby consents. So they're automatically giving consent for the broker to act as dual agent. So they're automatically in the contract in the pre-printed language. Now you're looking at your permission to be the dual agent in the transaction, okay? All right, in the event of an exchange, then the seller hereby consents to the broker collecting compensation from additional parties. Remember that you have to disclose, you can't have secret profit. You have to disclose what money you're receiving in a transaction. And when they say compensation, don't confuse that with commission, which is a word that the Department of Real Estate likes to use. The Department of Real Estate says, we don't care what you call it, TC fee, call it anything you want to call it, any money that the broker receives, we're going to call it commission. And here are the rules associated with commission. Compensation, a real close parallel to that, but there are going to be some differences, and we'll take a look at that. So consents to the broker collecting compensation from additional parties. Okay, so in an exchange, you might collect both sides of one transaction and part of another in the exchange, okay, for services rendered. Provided there is a disclosure, you must disclose, otherwise there's that little law called secret profit, self-dealing, and that was part of our lawsuit avoidance class today. I didn't really get a chance to get into it deep, but those are the problems that we face with that, okay? So to all parties of such agency, so dual agency now, and the compensation. So again, we have to make full disclosure. You need to be very clear about this. Don't think, oh, well, you know, I'll tell them, you know, I'll get around to it. No. You need to do it right away. You need to do it up front, and it needs to be very clear. Don't get cute, right? Okay. I call it cute realtoring. And so you want to avoid cute realtoring. Okay. Seller understands and agrees. So here we are. Seller understands and agrees that a dual agent may not without the express permission. What does express mean? In writing, okay, please, got to do this in writing and get confirmation that they got it. Don't just send them smoke signals and say, hey, guess what? I'm going to get paid, this extra money. No. You need to have something in writing. Email's okay, but as long as you get a response. Jackie Oliver, a brilliant attorney with our risk management department at SDAR, has said that email is replacing certified mail. It literally is becoming that powerful because you can actually, as long as you got documentation, not just that you sent it, because then they can always say they didn't get it, but if you can get a response, then that definitely needs to go into your file, okay? And as I said this morning in our lawsuit avoidance class, all your emails in a real estate transaction, you need to be printing them as a PDF and saving them up into zip forms, and that needs to be your library with all of the transaction information, all the material facts affecting the transaction, okay? DRE says, we'll take that. That's okay, all right? Okay. All right, so express permission of the respective party, disclose to the other party confidential information, including, but not limited to, the lawyers wrote it when you hear that, okay? Facts relating to either the buyer or seller's financial position, motivations, bargaining position, or other personal information that may affect price and may impact price, including the seller's willingness to accept a price less than the listing price or the buyer's willingness to pay a price greater than the price offered. Now, why is that important? And I'm going to tell you why. Now, I know maybe you haven't really read page 1 of that agency disclosure, but remember on page 1, it says that you will not tell the seller, if you're representing the seller, you will not tell the buyer how much the seller will take. If you're representing the buyer, you will not tell the seller how much the buyer will be willing to pay, and vice versa. Those need to be subjects that are, you can make recommendations. We always advise that you do an RPR or a cloud CMA or something and have the parties sign off on it. Now, here's my recommendation. In our lawsuit avoidance packet today, we discussed the fact that the agent wrote an offer for 10% less than asking price without even asking the buyer what they wanted to do. So your job is to get the offer. In other words, if somebody says, how much will the seller take? You say, hey, it's listed for $1 million. I know they'll take $1 million. And that has to be the answer. And a lot of times as listing agents, we get that call from somebody that said, and I'm pretty clever, I think, when I do it. I never call up and say, hey, how much will the seller take for the property? I always say to the listing agent, I always say, what's it going to take to put this deal together? Now, you need to write that down, because you know what? That question in itself is not a violation. The agent answering it is. Okay, so I can ask the question, what's it going to take, right? I didn't say how much, and now watch, and you know how this is, right? All of a sudden you got like diarrhea of the mouth. People are just telling you all kinds of stuff they really shouldn't be telling you. So, I'm not here to get anybody in trouble, but we have our ways of asking questions. I guess you got to go to law school or something like that. But anyway, it's an interesting way to ask the question is, what's it going to take to put this offer together? And that could mean, do you want me to buy, does the buyer need to buy the seller a car or something? I don't know what that means, but it just means, okay, so give me an idea. And then a lot of times you'll get a response. Okay, so, but the key is, in your agency disclosure, this language is included in your agency disclosure on page 1. Set a price less than the listing price, or the buyer's willingness to pay a price greater than the price offered. Okay, so whatever the buyer says we want to offer, you write that offer. Whatever the seller says I want for the house, that's what the seller wants for the house. And it's not like, well, you know what, I think they'll take. Okay, so you're listed at $1 million. I bet you could get that for $800,000. Let's give it a try. You're into I think you're into a non-gray area. Fine. Okay. And except as set forth above, a dual agent is obligated to disclose known facts materially affecting the value or desirability of the property to both parties. So now we're telling the seller, listen, if I know something about the property, I have to tell it. Okay. So I make the comment about, the seller says, do I have to disclose the death in bedroom number 1? And the question is, of course, was it within the last 3 years? And again, that's a big legal question, right? That's California Civil Code 1710, by the way. And so do I have to disclose the death in the property? And the answer is, well, if it's in the last 3 years, you do. And there's all kinds of arguments. Well, only if it's a big deal or a heinous act or something like that. And so, what, do you have to disclose it? And the answer is, if you know about something, you really need to disclose it. Okay, if you know about something, you don't necessarily need to disclose rumor or things like that. Okay, but these words came right out of the Strasburger case. Okay, material facts, disclose known facts materially affecting the value or desirability of the property, and you'll see that again in your transfer disclosure statement. And those words just rang all over California, and it set the standard for what our disclosure needs to look like. Okay, and by the way, your file needs to look like that. Question: if I'm dual, hi Stephanie, if I am dual agency and buyer gives me the appraisal, I am then obligated to give it to the seller. Well, you represent the seller. If you're dual agent, then you represent the seller, right? And you represent the buyer. Okay. Should this current transaction cancel? I know where you're going. Good question. Okay. Appraisal now becomes a disclosure for any future buyers. I don't know. And I'm going to tell you, probably not. Why? And here's why. You have to disclose material facts affecting the value and desirability of the property. An appraisal is not considered a material fact. It is considered an opinion of value. Okay, so that's an excellent question. And I can go into any room with any broker, and the argument can go on for days about, do I have to give them the appraisal? Now, I'm going to agree with you. If physical inspection reports, things like that. Oh yeah, but listen, give them everything. Give buyer number two everything. Okay, anything you withhold, they're going to get the Pete Selecki. I love Pete. He's our general counsel at SDAR, and and he says, you don't want to suffer the little old lady with the cookies. The one that comes over after closing, with the tray of cookies and says to your buyer, oh, welcome to the neighborhood. Here, have a cookie. Oh, by the way, did they tell you about the leak that they had in the basement that was, caused all this mold damage? That's the little old lady with the cookies, okay? And it could be a little old man with a cookie, whatever, that kind of thing. But the bottom line is you don't want that to happen. But your appraisal is just an opinion of value. Now, you and I, so therefore, disclose it? I don't know. Obviously, the seller is going to tell you what to do about that, and you might tell them it'd be a good idea, but I don't think it's necessary. But again, you need to talk to your broker, find out your broker's policy on that. But that's a great question, Stephanie. Thank you. So future buyers, listen, I think there's a chain created when you take a listing, and first of all, you need to be looking behind the listing and find out, when the seller bought the property, what disclosures did they have? You should be getting those disclosures. Those should be moved forward. I was management at a very large company in San Diego that doesn't exist anymore, unfortunately, not my fault. But we had this warehouse filled with disclosure documents, and anytime you did a transaction, we just looked it up by address and then send somebody out there, pull the file, and now we're giving those disclosures to the next buyer, even if we sold the property 10 years ago, right? So that's when you get that kind of a spread, you really got to make sure you're doing the whole job on that. Okay, so great question, Stephanie. Appraisal, I'm going to call that an opinion of value. I don't think you need to disclose it. I don't know a lot of attorneys that would argue with me about that. In fact, I don't know any, but if so, bring them on. I always love to have that conversation. It's always interesting to have a conversation with counsel. And by the way, I said it earlier, but our risk management committee, listen, you ever got a chance to come in and just look in the window? Some of the brightest minds in real estate law that you're ever going to find. It's amazing to see. We can still disclose that we have other offers from different agents. James, I'm going to take your question. I'm going to blow it up a little bit. So we can disclose we can disclose the content, price, and terms of competing offers to multiple buyers. Okay, so you got 5 buyers writing offers on the property. You have permission from the seller in the listing agreement, okay, to disclose the content and terms of those offers to the competing buyers. And that was a rule we changed in January of 2008. The Code of Ethics changed and said, hey, you know what? That works in the seller's best interest to get them more money for the property than they might have originally contemplated. And so we need you to be able to do that. So the answer is, yeah, if I'm reading your question right. We've disclosed we have other offers from different agents. Yeah. Okay. Now, and I'm going to tell you, I've been doing this for a little while. I've had that conversation where the other agent says to me, we've got another offer, right? And I'm sitting there going, oh, hell you do. And I've seen that happen many a time, right? Okay, so I'm going to just have to take it for granted that we're all ethical, we're all truthful, we're going to be straight up about stuff. Do you need to disclose that there is another offer? And the answer is no. But sometimes people disclose things that don't exist. That I have a hard time with. I think that's a lie. Okay, so James, I probably over-answered your question. If I didn't hit it, let me know. But thank you. That's a good question. Okay, thanks. James, you have a unique way of telling me, okay, Kev, I got it. All right, thank you, James. I appreciate you, I do. Okay, all right, so let's take a look, and I apologize, it looks like I'm not looking at you, but I actually have 2 screens, so the one screen is much larger so that I can read it a little bit better. In a multiple counteroffer, can I ask for proof of other offer? Sure, you can ask. It's interesting. I've had agents ask me for a copy of my buyer representation agreement. I don't, it's personal to me. So the answer was, no, I'm not going to give it to you. And my response to them was, why don't you give me a copy of your listing agreement? And they're not going to do that either. So, we have to assume, Stephanie, that the people that we're dealing with are being ethical and that they have other offers. But I know that there are people out there, I've had it happen. I'm not saying that they're realtors, but I've had it happen where people have used that ploy. Well, I've got another offer. And then, of course, mine doesn't come together. And then 3 weeks later, it's still active in the MLS. that tells me maybe they weren't quite being truthful. But okay, I'm going to assume that they are being truthful. I have this theory. I believe in the goodness of people, okay? And I believe that everybody is straightforward and honest. And I know Linda says I'm naive, but I give everybody a chance to prove me wrong. And so I'm just going to assume that everybody's telling me the truth and that we're all acting, in good faith with each other, good faith negotiation, et cetera, et cetera. But you know what? You're kind of thinking sometimes that maybe that's not the case, okay? If you got kids, you definitely know it's not the case. So, okay, all right. So, okay, again. So again, my favorite words: disclose known facts materially affecting the value or desirability of the property, okay? And that is the standard of care for the seller, and it is also your standard, okay? You have multiple standards that you are subject to, okay? So any questions about any of that so far? I don't see any, so I'm going to move us on to the next part of our discussion today. So that being said, we're going to go ahead and we're going to hit 9D. And again, a lot of this is the pre-printed language, and obviously there's enough to talk about that, we just sometimes, a lot of times you have a fairly small amount of material that takes up all the time. So we'll keep going, but again, please ask me questions as you go along, especially if you're seeing things in the field. I'm a practitioner like you, I'm out in the field, but again, most of what I handle, it's already a problem by the time I get it. So let me know if you're seeing anything different. So confirmation. So remember that the law says you must disclose the concept of agency. So at the time of my listing, I disclose the concept of single agency with the seller. At the time of representing my buyer, I get a buyer representation agreement exclusive. I must disclose the concept of single agency now with the buyer, okay? But the minute that I become aware of what the true agency relationships are, then I need to confirm that in writing. And in your RPA, paragraph number 2 satisfies that. And that paragraph, by the way, used to be back on paragraph, I think it was 16 or 17 in the contract. And I'll never forget Veronica Kilpatrick, our deputy commissioner, saying that nobody was ever filling it out, and yet that it's required by law. You must disclose the concept of agency, but then you must also confirm agency, and confirmation occurs when we know each side who's representing who. And if they're under the same agent, broker, then now you have dual agency, and you absolutely must disclose dual agency. You must disclose single agency. You must confirm all of it at the time of contract, okay? And I've read cases where the DRE has taken commissions away from brokers. I'm a fairly sizable amount of commission away from brokers because the agency disclosure didn't occur prior to writing the offer, prior to writing the contract. And so, TC catches it, 2 days before closing. The department is held that is too late. Okay. All right. Okay. So broker. So we are on this part here. There's a really good agent that was in our class this morning, and I sent her ahead of time some of the, I've known her for 30 years. She's wonderful. I love Ashley. And I sent her the stuff ahead of time. I said, can you take a look at this? Are you seeing anything that I could add or subtract? She comes back with, I love it. That's all. We've seen all that. And so, here you go. You got another veteran in the business who says, oh, wow, I've seen that before. Yeah, that's really cool. So, hopefully it's not you, right? It's something somebody else was doing. And so we're going to talk now. Let's see, where did I lose myself already? Confirmation. Okay. So broker shall confirm the agency relationship described above in C, A through C, or as modified in writing, express, remember express, prior to or concurrent with seller's execution of a purchase agreement. I think that's what we've been saying, right? So you have to have the seller agree that they understand it's either single or dual agency before they proceed forward with the contract. And so once the contract comes in there, that's the point that you need to be doing that, not at the end of the transaction. Everybody good? It's an incredibly important point. Okay, and so much so that again it's a license loser, and I don't want to see any of you lose your license. But these are the things that that worry me. I'm talking to you, I'm preaching to the choir. You all are brilliant. You're here listening to this stuff, but the cases I get are like, well, you could have attended my class. Yeah, I know you're busy, right? Okay, all right. So let's talk about E. We're going to talk about potentially competing sellers and buyers. So A through C were the concept of agency. Now we're going to get permission from the seller to represent maybe other sellers in the neighborhood or represent other buyers for this property. Okay, so this is that catch-all, and this came out of, this is fairly recent. This is only within the last 10 years. This came out of a monster court case, and it was a fascinating concept. I remember when it came out, and I remember we were in the risk management committee. We were like, huh? God, that makes sense. Why? We never thought about that. There's some enterprising lawyer out there who actually created a pretty good argument for the fact that if you were going to list property, and then list other property, again, all under the agent, the broker of the company, okay, all under the agent, you're going to be able to list other properties that are going to compete with the seller's offer. Then you need to have their permission, the seller's listing, you need to have their permission. You need to have their permission to allow other sellers to, the broker to list other sellers of properties in their area. Now, it was an interesting court case. The court didn't come back to say how big that area was. So we don't know. I mean, literally, it could have been a block away. I'm thinking this case was actually out of Del Mar, but because I'm always thinking that it was off of, was it not Via de Santa Fe? Gosh darn, right behind Flower Hill Mall. Anyway, here was the situation. So we had a street. We had seller number one. So this is S1, lists their house. They put it on the market for $980,000. Okay, 980 big ones, right? So, and they list it with broker. Okay. Then about a couple weeks later, across the street, same brokerage, right? Same brokerage, because that's the agent is the broker. List seller number two's property, and this one is for $720,000. Okay, don't you love it when your computer doesn't show everything? Bottom line is, seller number one says, "Hey, hang on a second, that's not fair. You just killed the value of my property. My property was worth 980 grand when we put it on the market, but when you put another property on the market over here for 720,000." You just knocked my property down by, what is that, $160,000? Okay, that's not right. And so seller number one sues broker and says, you just ruined my property value. I trusted you that you would try to get me 980,000, but you're sure not going to get that when you go on and listed another one across the street for less money. And guess what? Seller number one wins. Okay, so let's talk about that. Potentially competing sellers and buyers. Seller understands that broker may have or obtain listings on other properties. So may already have them, may obtain other ones later. Again, I don't know how big my area is, okay? And that potential buyers may consider, make offers on, or purchase through the broker property the same as or similar to seller's property, okay? So, hey, you know what? Everybody's going to look for a good deal, right? Seller consents to broker's representation of sellers and buyers of other properties before, during, and after the end of this agreement. All right. So now we are getting the seller pre-printed language, nothing you have to write, getting the seller's permission to, and their acceptance of the fact. Okay. So it's a disclosure and it's consent. Okay. So disclosing the fact that we are going to list other properties in the area. And even after you're gone, we're going to list properties in the area. Okay. And you consent to us doing that. All right. Okay. So before, during, and after the end of this agreement, seller acknowledges. So here we go back to acknowledges. Look at that, pre-checked. You can't uncheck it. Possible representation of more than one buyer or seller, disclosure, and consent. And so this used to be now you're going to paint myself in a corner. What was the name of the form that we had before? It was the wasn't the AD. It was God. Now I've lost it. Okay. Anyway, it was a different form before, but we rewrote it. We weren't using any of this until that lawsuit came up. and that lawsuit came up and judgment not good, right, for the broker. And our, kind of CAR, we're here to protect the brokers, okay, and subsequently the salespeople and the associates and all that, okay. But we had to put this in here because we needed to get the consent of the seller. And by the way, you do the same thing with the buyer, right? On the buyer side, you get them to consent to the fact that your brokerage might be representing more than one competing buyers on a property, okay? So this is going to be my CAR form PRBS, okay? And so did I pull that up? No, I didn't. Wow, I don't have time to pull it up. Okay, so normally I go through these paragraphs ahead of time, of course, and pull up the documents that they reference, but I don't have that document for you. Sorry about that, but pretty simple, pretty straightforward, nothing to put in there. They just sign it, okay? And your duty, your obligation, I'm sorry, don't use the word duty, your obligation is to make the disclosure to get the consent, but that's as far as it goes. You don't have to get into the legal issues and all that kind of stuff. Your job here is just to make sure that everybody understands that this is what's going to happen. Unless your broker doesn't list properties, that they're buyer's agents only, which is kind of rare, although there are some good companies that do that. And then there are some companies that don't work with buyers. They only work with sellers. So this works in all those fields. Okay. Everybody good? Questions? Can I ask for, okay, Stephanie, yeah, can I ask for proof of the other offer? Sure. Well, you can ask for anything you want. How are they going to send that to you? So one of the things, remember that the listing agreement, your question is, again, a good one. The listing agreement gives you the ability by the seller. The seller has given you permission to disclose the content in terms of competing offers, but it doesn't mean you have to. You're going to do it when it's in the advantage of the seller. Okay, so what I said earlier was I'm just going to have to take it on faith. I doubt I'm going to get a listing agent to send me a copy of another offer or another counter offer for that matter, even though the multiple counter offer forms state that the seller is making a counter offer with maybe or maybe not similar terms and conditions as the one that they're getting now. So it could be different terms and conditions. I've always said, keep it in your head that it is not about the price. It's all the seller thinks, all the seller ever hears is price. But those people that know that are going to write a price, but it's going to cost the seller more money to sell it at that price. And that's the real issue. That's where your strength comes in, is knowing that a higher purchase offer does not necessarily mean a sale. It just means a higher purchase price offer. And remember, it's got to appraise. There's a lot of issues in that. And they might be wanting a lot of different stuff that the other lower offer might not be asking for. And the net to the seller is the real important number. That's what the seller is really saying. So you got to learn those things about what is the seller asking for versus what do they really mean. So when the seller says, well, I want to get as much as I can for the house, I always say, oh God, finally. Most of my sellers don't care how much they get. They just want to find a family that'll love it the way they did. No, right? So my comment is always, you know what, my job is to get you more net, more walk away for the house, and that might not be the highest price. Remember, some of those higher price offers are not as likely to close necessarily than the lower price. I do a lot of VA transactions, and I encounter people that, I won't work with a VA. Why not? I mean, they served your country. And that's just one small part of it. But, the other part of it is it's the most likely deal to close, right? I mean, because they don't have to credit qualify. They get other, the VA looks at other issues in order to get their financing together. So, they're more likely to be able to get that offer. And then, of course, then you have the cash offers that want to steal something. And so, all of this is the kind of stuff that you're just going to deal with in the business anyway, okay? All right, everybody good on that? I might even have time to pull up that other form. Okay, I'm good. Let me go to our next page here. And we are going to talk about paragraph number 10, security insurance, showings, audio, and video. I have some funny stories to tell you about what this is looking like. So security, well, let's go through the body. All right, so broker is not responsible for loss of or damage to personal or real property or person, whether attributable to use of a key safe lockbox, a showing of the property or otherwise. So the broker's just not going to be responsible for it. The seller, we're asking you to give us permission to get people inside the house. We're asking you to give us access through a lockbox system, but we're not going to be responsible for anything that happens. Please make sure you also use your KLA form, your key safe lockbox addendum. Excuse me, and there have been some revisions to that form as well. And oh, by the way, remember that on June the 16th, we launched the new forms. So, we're going to go through your library. We're going to go through your templates. We're going to update forms that are currently there. And then we're going to, in the library, at least, we're going to add forms that aren't there. We've got a whole bunch of new forms coming out. Again, more forms now. So you're going to see those in there. We're not going to touch a transaction in progress. We don't want to change a form in a transaction you've got that you've already had signed that said different things. So we're not going to do that. Remember, your laws change twice a year, right? January and July 1st. Those are my trigger dates. Laws always take effect at that time, almost always. Okay. So we write our new forms in anticipation of those things happening. So if you saw my new forms class, you know that some forms it's okay for you to use prior versions, and in some cases you need to use the new form. And it says, I've told you about that as well. So if you don't have the new forms, send me an email. I'll send it to you. Okay. All right. Okay. So broker's not responsible. Anything that happens, slip and falls, investigators. So third parties, including but not limited to, there's lawyers again, appraisers, inspectors, brokers, prospective buyers, may have access to and take videos and photographs of the interior of the property, okay? And I don't know, if you've been showing property, sometimes that's really hard for you to control, right? They're walking around with a camera phone and they're taking pictures and doing all kinds of stuff. And how do you know they're not casing the joint, right? Oh, they got 4 kids. I don't care, right? I mean, they can have 4 kids and still be casing the joint, okay? So, but, we just don't know. So we need to tell the seller that this is going to happen. In this day and age, some of these things are pretty sophisticated, and God knows some of them are pretty accurate, okay? Like, there's certain cameras out there. I don't want to get too close to those, all right? I mean, anyway, okay. You all know what I'm talking about. Okay, all right. So seller agrees, 1, to take reasonable precautions to safeguard and protect valuables that might be accessible during showings of the property. Folks, opioids, right? Drugs, okay? Leaving stuff in the house exposed. I've seen money belt clips on top of dressers. I've seen guns, loaded guns, right, on top of dressers. I've seen stuff left out in houses that, what are you thinking, right? So you need to make sure you counsel your seller when you're taking the listing. Put this stuff away. I mean, I've walked into houses where you really think that photograph is appropriate. There's going to be people coming through the house. Maybe you don't want people to see that picture. Sometimes, I'm not talking about it like a Van Gogh or something, but I'm talking about sometimes I've seen some kind of interesting pictures. Anyway, there's a lot of stuff I've seen when touring homes that I think sometimes if they had just thought about it for 2 minutes, and remember, your seller sells a home, every 3 to 5 years in San Diego County, versus you are held to the standard of someone selling a home every day, right? Even if you're not selling a home every day, they think you are. And so they're counting on you for advice. So we need to give them that advice. We need to say, hey, listen, you need to, you got a money clip, you need to put it in a safe. Okay. I've got a safe in my house, right? You need to put it someplace where people aren't going to get their hands on it. Please lock away the guns. I mean, they have key locks. They have all kinds of stuff you can do with that. Let's try to keep the kids from getting hurt. And probably my biggest issue is opioids. And I was president of the association last year, and we had a big deal about, and it's just amazing how many people die from this stuff every year. I mean, we worry about COVID-19. I'm not minimizing it, but we lose a lot of youngsters to these opioids, and a lot of the times they're just freely available. It's like easy to find, and they're in the medicine cabinet. Oh, go figure. I never would have thought to look there. Okay. So please lock the stuff up. this is why I sit down with a seller and I go over the listing agreement with them. And I don't go over it in the kind of detail that you and I are going over it through here right now, because I'm covering legal issues. I'm covering all kinds of stuff. But you know what? I think you need to spend the time with the seller. Don't just send them the document, say, here, sign it so I can put it in the MLS. You know, that just tells the seller you're angry about something, like you don't think you're getting paid enough or something like that. You know, you need to spend the time with the seller. And again, all this time you spend with the seller in advance of taking the listing is worth all the time you're going to have to deal with them after it. Okay. So it's important. All right. Okay. So that might be accessible during showings of the property. 2, obtain insurance. You'd be surprised. A lot of people think they have insurance and they don't actually have it. So, so for example, I've got insurance. I've got, USAA, right? Okay, well, but if I want to insure the guns, or I want to insure the watches, or some of the high dollar items, I'm going to have to get a rider on that policy. Well, not everybody knows that. And so we need to make sure that we explain to the seller, you need to get insurance to protect against those kinds of things. You've got something that's really valuable, then let's get some insurance on it, even if it's only during the listing period. Okay. All right. So, and you're not paying for that insurance. Okay. Broker does not maintain insurance to protect the seller. A lot of times the seller thinks that you do, and you do not. Ask your broker. Your broker will tell you, we don't insure their stuff. It came up in the lawsuit avoidance class today. 3 different kinds of insurance the broker should have. E&O insurance for one thing, general liability for another, and then finally your workers' comp. Those are the 3 big ones, right? Most people are only thinking of E&O, but you got to watch for those other types of insurances as well, okay? So persons visiting the property may or may not be aware that they could be recorded. So, I think houses today, wow, we never thought about this stuff. We got cameras, Linda's worried I got the whole house wired, but we got cameras all over the place. You can't get to my front door without, you being on film. It's on the cloud, it's on my phone, I can be in, Saskatchewan and I see you dropping off a package, right? Or stealing a package. Okay. So, it's amazing the things that we're doing inside of houses. Folks, I'm going to tell you, I represent a buyer. You need to tell your buyer, let's not have any of those key conversations when we're in the house. Let's wait till we get outside someplace safe, because we just don't know what kind of listening devices there are and things like that. Fascinating what these people are doing. Okay. Installed by the seller, such things as, well, nanny cams, hidden security cameras. Some of them aren't so hidden at all, right? There's a bookshelf camera, but I've been reading up on these cameras, and it's just amazing the clarity. And by the way, they record voices too. And so how would you like it if you're in the house with the buyer looking at the property and there's no seller around, and your buyer says, listen, I don't care how much I pay for this place, I want this house. And now you're going to write an offer, and the seller heard the whole thing. So kind of takes away that superior negotiating ability that you might have. So let's watch out for that. Okay. Seller is advised to post a notice. There's no law yet. Okay. Disclosing the existence of those security devices. Okay. In our fact pattern this morning, we talked about setting the licensee gave the buyer their key to the property, the lockbox key, $2,500 ticket, right? Okay, and then so we talked about an alarm going off when they access the property, probably because the agent didn't check the listing, right? But the alarm goes off. Okay, so that's a security device, and there's a lot of different kinds of security devices. So it just amazes me that with technology the way that it is today, and it's pretty obvious and pretty well advertised, and yet you still have people out there that don't know that they could be being recorded. Okay, your phone, I always worry. I'm in a meeting, and we're in like an executive session in a meeting, and I'm looking around to see who's recording, on their phone. So that's just me always being suspicious. Okay, all right. Questions about any of that? Seeing none. Wow. Yeah, we move. Seeing none. Let's take us to photographs and internet advertising. So really kind of carrying over the same theme, and we'll go through this pretty quick. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. In fact, I think this is our last page, but I do still want to show you the property images agreement that we're using. That's kind of an important thing. So let's talk about photographs and internet advertising, 2 separate issues. In order to effectively market the property for sale, it is often necessary to provide photographs, virtual tours, and other media to the buyers. I mean, a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? And so listen, if you're good at this, like for example, we have a listing down in Mission Boulevard in PB, South PB. You know, the picture from the camera phone is a way different picture than one where we had a professional photographer come in with a Matterport and all that. Whoa, I mean, you know, you can get seasick, okay? So it's important, and the public loves to look at those pictures, okay? So seller agrees or doesn't that the broker may photograph or otherwise electronically capture images of the exterior and interior of the property, okay, for static being just the picture, and or virtual tours, moving of the property by buyers and others for use on the broker's website. Okay, now you're already sitting there thinking, uh-oh, I know what happens now. It goes from here up to there, and then it goes off to the world. And in the world, I may never be able to get it back. So they need to be thinking about whether they're going to leave anything out that's important that they don't want to have photographed. We've had cases where, you know, the photographs were so good it caused a breaking and entering because the bad guy saw the photograph and said, wow, that's an original painting. That's worth breaking into that house. Ew. Okay. All right. So, and other marketing materials and sites. Okay. So the seller has to be, you have to make the seller aware that those things are possible. And again, obviously you have to have their permission. I think it should be more than just to check a box, does not agree, but you know, for our purposes right now, because I don't think it's gotten quite as crazy, but that's where we are at the moment. Okay. Seller acknowledges that once the images are placed on the internet, neither the broker nor the seller has control over who can view them and what viewers may make of the images, or how long such images may remain available on the internet. Now that's important, right? Because here I go, I take my listing, I get the pictures, I put them up there, they're there forever. The internet is forever. And so be really, really judicious about the type of picture that you're taking, and be really careful about what you put up there. So, you know, like for example, you know, now your MLS has this ability where you can load all 28 pictures with one shot. Did you look through the pictures and make sure they didn't have anything in there they shouldn't have had in there? That kind of thing, rather than just loading them up and cavalierly wandering off with it. Here, you think we're getting a permission from the seller to do whatever we want to do, but we're really not. Okay. All right. So once they're up there, they're up there. And we don't know how long they're going to remain available. I've had that phone call as a broker. I've had that phone call where the buyer called me up a year after they bought the home and said, hey, you know, why are you still advertising my home for sale? And I'm not advertising your home for sale. Well, yeah, it's still on the internet, and I need you to take those pictures down. You know, I don't want people to see my before and my after and all that. And I go, well, I don't have any control over that. And sometimes it's a little tough to have that explanation with them, that in fact, I don't have any control over any of that stuff. Okay. All right. Seller further assigns any rights in all images to the broker and agrees that such images are the property of the broker. Okay. A lot of times you're paying for it, right? When's the last time you had a seller pay for the pictures? Okay. And that broker may use such images for advertising. All right. So, you know, like I say, when's the last time a seller paid for that stuff? Well, it's their house. Okay. All right. And including post-sale and for brokers' business in the future. So in other words, I'm going to use them for bragging rights. So I need to make sure I have that permission from the seller. Okay. All right. Let's take a look at questions on that. Seeing none, I'll go ahead forward. Let's take a look at paragraph number B. Seller acknowledges that prospective buyers and or other persons coming out of the property may also take photographs, videos, or other images of the property. Okay. So I'm not sure I'm happy with that, but okay. Seller understands that broker does not have the ability to control the or block the taking and use of such images by any such persons. And you know what? I know that it has happened out there that with technology being what it is, people are taking pictures they shouldn't be taking pictures of and posting those on the internet, and they are not the listing agent, they are not the seller, and so we need to get the seller's okay that that's what's going to happen. So if checked, seller instructs the broker to publish in the MLS that taking of images is limited to those persons preparing appraisals or inspections. So in other words, the seller can say, no, I don't want any pictures taken of my property. And if I don't want any pictures taken of my property, I'm going to check this box, and then I want you, the broker, to put in the multiple listing service that I don't want any pictures taken by anybody in the property. I'm going to recommend that you also put a notice up on the property when people come into the property, no picture taking, that kind of thing. And even with all those safeguards, you're still going to run the risk that, everyone's, once in a while, somebody's going to think, of course, when you tell somebody not to do something, they're like kids, right? Now they're going to do it for sure. So seller acknowledges that unauthorized persons may still take images who do not have access to or read any limiting instruction in the MLS. That's why one of the reasons I suggest you also post notice, or who take images regardless of any limiting instruction in the MLS. So you told them not to do it, they're going to do it anyway. I think we all know people like that. And so we need to make sure that the seller's aware of all the possibilities, okay? And I think the attorneys did a really good job of writing this, because they're covering all the eventualities that you and I sometimes, we think it's really obvious, but they're putting it in writing, and I think that's important, okay? All right. Once the images are taken and or put on public display on the internet or otherwise, neither the broker nor the seller has control over who views those images, nor what use viewers may make of the images. And again, I would have that conversation with your buyer as well. You're going to buy the property. The nice pictures that you saw on the internet were what attracted you to the property. Just remember that we don't have the ability to take those pictures down. So those pictures are going to be up there. But gee, now you're proud of your home. You bought it. The pictures are what sold it to you. And so, be proud of that fact, okay? Some of your flippers, they don't want those pictures out there because they think, well, I don't want people to see, that I really didn't do much to it, right? I'm just going to flip it and make a profit, that kind of thing. Okay, any questions on any of that? So far, seeing none. I do want to show you my property images agreement. It's not actually my property images agreement. It's actually unknown to me. Where is it? Screen? No. Not going to be in that. There it is, property images agreement. So California, so this is a form, this created a real stir when it first came out a couple of years ago. I actually got called by a couple of brokers or a couple of photographers who said, what can we do about this? I'm not signing away my rights to the media. I don't see this form being used a lot. I think it should be used more, but I'm not seeing that the adoption's been big until we get into trouble, and then we're going to wish we had, right? So simple stuff up at the top. Whoops, okay. Create my draw here. So, simple stuff, give me the date, give me the real estate licensee, whoever that is, and then the photographer's name. Parties hereby agree. Paragraph number 1, we're going to describe what the work looks like. Okay, so in other words, here's the scope of the photographer's work. Okay, all the things that they're going to be doing, all of these things in here, and then what is the term of the agreement? So remember what I said to you a long time ago, and I said that you need to think about these things in the way that lawyers think about things. They're looking in terms of outline. So, I always love to see outlines, 1, 1A, 1B, 2, 2A, 2B. We like that because it creates structure. It's like not having a run-on sentence. Okay, so I got terms of my agreement. Okay, until terminated in writing by either party. Delivery to the REL of the images for the identified property or some other thing. Okay. All right. Paragraph number 2. We're going to talk about, let me scroll this up here a little bit so I get a little more room. And paragraph number 2, we're going to talk about compensation. Everybody's always interested in that. For services, how much is it going to be? Maybe there's a separate agreement. Maybe there's an invoice. Or it can be a dollar figure right here. Specifications. So images shall be in a reasonable format, quality for internet and print media use, right? I don't know that we can really tell them what it has to look like. You can buy whatever kind of pictures you want, right? Okay, set forth below. Number 4, my grant of rights. Photographer grants the real estate licensee rights to the images as below. And this is where, you need to put your thinking cap on. So let's take a look. So what are my grants of my rights? I've got either an assignment agreement. Oops, sorry. I'm either going to have an assignment agreement here, or I'm going to have my exclusive license agreement. All right, my assignment agreement says that the photographer is giving me the pictures, assigning all the rights to them. The exclusive license agreement says you have a right to use it. Okay, so that, and then we're flying on time here. If checked, do not agree to grant photographer a limited license to use the property for his or her own portfolio. And when they say limited, it means just for that purpose, not necessarily a limitation of time. And then finally, my representation and my warranty. So photographer represents and warrants that it owns the right to all of those pictures. No third party has a right to it, and that they have full right and power to enter into the agreement. So full right and power to convey. Further warrants and represents that REL is under no obligation to credit the buyer. So in other words, the photographer is not looking for a pat on the back, whether express or virtual, for the job that they did. Okay, indemnity, the photographer shall or shall not indemnify, defend, and hold harmless, claims and liabilities, what all that language means. They agree not to sue anybody, and they agree to indemnify you. In other words, they pay your cost of defense in case you are, okay? And then we look at relationship of the parties. So photographer understands, agrees that it is an independent contractor, not an employee, and nothing in the agreement shall create a partnership or any of those other things, okay? Additional terms, quality, construction, enforceability of this agreement shall be governed by the laws of the state of California. You got to put that in there, otherwise we're all in Montana doing something, okay? And no oral agreement, this is all of it. The whole contract is right here, and it survives the expiration of the agreement. And this is all boilerplate stuff. I call it boilerplate because it is, as far as the legal field is concerned. For you and I, most times we don't even read it, right? We don't even know what it says. So question, am I the only person who has never heard of this form? Julie, you're right on. Listen, that's what I said in the very beginning. I said, I don't know anybody who uses it. I'm going to tell you should be using it. And it's like, and you're all, you're obviously bright because you're here, right? And so you want to learn something new. Nobody uses this form. And so guess what? We get into fights with the photographer. The photographer said, oh, no, I took the pictures. I own it, right? I go, wait a minute. I paid you to take the pictures. I own it. And now you've got a battle, right? And probably a court battle. And then you get the seller coming in. The seller says, hey, you know what? I think I'm entitled to the pictures. It's my property. And so, whenever there's this possibility of creating dissension, we want to try to fix it before it becomes a problem. So that's why we're at least going to have, remember, this is the agreement between the licensee and the photographer that the licensee is hiring to do the work. So you're right. Am I the only one who's ever heard of this form? Yeah, it's a good form. It's the PIA form. You should be using this form. I mean, it created a stir when it came out. I mean, and, we had a couple of really well-known photographers come into the risk management committee and say, you can't do this. And we said, we didn't do it. It's the state level that did this. They're trying to, what's the word for it? Manage from the state level. And it's like, listen, we're San Diego, we're special, right? And so it's like, anyway, create a whole bunch of stuff. So Julie, thank you. That's a great comment. So this is all just your boiler, contract language stuff. Broker identity and rights. If the REL is a salesperson or a broker associate, so not the broker, okay, that broker's name and license number is as follows. So we want to know what the broker firm name is, and we want to know what the number is. And if you haven't memorized your broker's ID number, you should think about doing it. As between the licensee and the broker, rights to images granted under this agreement shall be addressed in a separate written agreement between them. So in our office, we have an office policy manual, and in that office policy manual, it addresses the issues of photographs and who they belong to and things like that. I don't find a lot of brokers arguing with their agent about it, but I think you're going to see more and more of that, only because, there's this, the right? And we talked recently, there's a new rule in front of NAR, that says that the broker's entitled to all their information. And some people say, yeah, why not? And other people say, no, they're not. They leave the MLS to go to a different MLS, and so they're not entitled to it. It all belongs within that MLS. So there's that big fight going on about that. So trust me, anything you can create a fight over, we're going to do it. Somebody's going to do it, okay? MLS rules. So MLS rules generally contain restrictions against, and remember, this is a statewide form, and have the right to impose citations on its participants in instances of reuse of images. So you all know that in the MLS, if you take a listing on a property you are not allowed to go back in and copy the pictures from the previous listing. Okay, you may not use those pictures. They don't belong to you. Once they've been given to the MLS, now they belong to the MLS. So they belong to the broker. You see what I'm talking about? Okay, so the MLS is going to take rule over it and say, no, those are our pictures, so you may not copy those pictures. And frankly, so like my agent goes out and spends $1,000 having a professional photographer take pictures of a property and then loses the listing and somebody else gets it and they use the same photographs. No. Maybe I'll let you, but you're going to pay some compensation for that, and we're going to have an agreement in writing. So this just says, the MLS rule says, you may not be able to do that. It may belong to us already. And so you might have to obtain prior written authorization from the originating licensee or other appropriate party about whether or not you can use it. And I think you really should. I just don't think it's fair. Again, so the same rule that says, hey, guess what, Mr. Seller, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, once we put the pictures on the internet, they're out there. They everybody sees them. They don't necessarily belong to everybody, but I guess they kind of do. But we need to have that conversation with you that, we're not going to be able to pull them back. Well, that same rule we don't want to apply to us, right? And so, but you and I both have that work product thought that says that I don't want to go spend money on something, just have somebody else come along and just kind of copy it. So that's it, page 1 and 2. Looks like I do have a question. Julie, that's pretty funny. Am I the only person who's never heard of this form? James, how can you ensure you don't get stuck with the cost of pictures if the deal doesn't close? Hey, I don't know. That's actually an interesting question. So I got asked to come in and help another agent with a listing that they had. It was a very expensive piece of property at the time. It was $6 million, and today, of course, it's like 4 times that. But they part of their listing agreement was they took a reduction in commission if the seller would pay a certain amount of money every month towards marketing the property, and that included pictures and things like that. So it's just kind of interesting. In that case, you wouldn't get stuck with the cost of the pictures, but unfortunately, we also never sold the home. And part of the reason was because, at the 11th hour, the seller was facing foreclosure, worked out a deal with the lender and let them keep the place and continue to work on it. So we lost everything, but you can spend, welcome to real estate. Joe Jelly, who's been around since I was licensed in California back in I was licensed in California in the mid-'80s. And Joe Jelly used to always say, if you represent a buyer, you're 30 days to a paycheck. If you represent a seller, you may never get paid. So, those are things to consider. Our business is such that we do spend a lot of money on things that don't produce results. And that's just the nature of it. But of course, we're all making billions of dollars, every week. So, in their eyes, right? So, so the answer to the question is you might get the seller to pay for it. You're going to have to include that in the listing agreement under paragraph number 3, any fee that you receive, right? Seller agrees to give you $100 a month towards, marketing or pictures or something like that. That may be a hedge against it. On the other hand, there are other ways to keep that from being a problem. Number 1, take properties listed at the right price so that you're taking a property to sell it, not to market it. And that's important. There are a lot of things that you can do, but it's always that dynamic between the listing agent and the seller that you're going to have to get past. So how do you get, and trust me, the pictures is only one small part of it. But it's, and I feel your pain. I'm a control person. When I take a listing on a property, everybody knows I'm in charge. I'm going to, give me the ball. I'm going to run with it. Okay. And so I just have different approach to things. And I've said this to you before when we talked about the winning listing presentation that we did a couple of weeks ago, which I just thought was so much fun. And, I go on the listing appointment thinking, do I want this listing? And almost every top producer I talk to thinks that same way. And it's just something you evolve into. It's like, do I want this listing? Rather than some of us, when we're newer, we're thinking, oh my God, I hope I get this listing. Well, maybe you don't want the listing. If you take an overpriced listing, you might end up, having nothing at the final listing point. And those are, I don't want you to have that happen to you. I really don't. But part of that is that negotiation, that quid pro quo between yourself and the seller. Okay. So James, thank you. Good question. Julie, you're the question of the hour. And any other questions? Anybody else have anything? Because that is really, I think that is really going to be all that I have at the moment. Let me pull back up our screen. So there's my email address. Again, if you want to get those emails on Saturday, send me an email. If you want a copy of any of the stuff that we talked about today, send me an email. You're here for comic relief. Yeah, we all need a straight man or straight woman or whatever that means. But yeah, thank you, Julie. But no, we had a lot of fun here, and I do thank you. I so appreciate the value of your time. I never want to waste it. There's my email address. I send this thing out once a week. It's got clickable links. I mean, I go through great pains to make sure the links work. I think I've made one mistake in all the time I've done it, but you can just click on the link and it takes you right to the class, so you don't have to play around with all that other stuff. So other questions? So send me an email. Happy to help you any way that I can. And it doesn't look like it looks like I'm starting to lose people, so I'm just going to assume that I'm going to hope that you all have a wonderful day. Please be safe. Stay out of trouble. We're back again tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock, and then at 1 o'clock we'll be doing the RPA, so Thursday. So again, as I said earlier today, I've committed my Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday to you, and I want to help you. And I know it's a lot of material. And again, if you want a copy of the webinar, give me a little bit of time. Sometimes it takes me 24 hours, sometimes a little more than that to respond, but that's just because of the sheer volume of messages from a lot of different sources. So thank you all for being here today. I wish you the very best, and I look forward to seeing you later. Take care for now.